Sometimes it's weird to me to make these kinds of videos where I'm actually talking about basketball, because I think sometimes people come to my channel and they see all the offseason, the trade stuff that I do, and they think that I just sit on Basketball Reference and look at the contracts page all day. I do actually watch the games, and I do actually want to talk about actual basketball too. Anyway, welcome back everybody. My name is Tucker, and in today's video, we are talking about Russell Westbrook and the Houston Rockets and the problem that he continues to create for this team in the postseason, specifically in this matchup against the LA Lakers. The way that they're defending the Houston Rockets is making Russell Westbrook a borderline liability right now on the offensive end of the floor for the Houston Rockets. We're going to talk about what that means for him, for the team, for the trade that they made for Westbrook, and for the rest of this series moving forward, and how the Rockets could potentially make this a little bit easier on themselves the rest of the way in a series that I think they can definitely be competitive in against the Lakers. But really quickly before we get started, if you enjoy content like this, then consider subscribing. I upload basically every single day, and leaving a like rating is a great way to let me know that you're enjoying this type of content, and it helps out the video a ton as well. With that said, let's go and get started. Okay, so really quickly, let's do kind of a review on the whole Russell Westbrook as a Rocket situation. So this is a team that in the offseason made a deal involving Chris Paul and Russell Westbrook, sending extra picks and pick swaps to the Thunder to get Westbrook on the roster, with the idea that having another explosive perimeter creator alongside James Harden would allow him to not have as much pressure on himself to score in the regular season, and in the postseason just provide them more options offensively and just kind of figure it out from there, as opposed to a guy in Chris Paul that, yes, is a very good creator and playmaker, but is a little bit more controlling of the offense, wasn't getting along as well with James Harden, and just provides them a little bit more variance in a roster and a scheme that relies so much on such fixated stats and numbers and a certain way to play. Russell Westbrook provided them just kind of a wild card, and that was kind of the idea behind bringing him in. And then mid-season, they realized, this doesn't really work all that well with our spacing. Having a guy in Westbrook that off the ball is not that much of a threat, and having someone like James Harden that needs the ball in his hands so much, it was a little bit tough for them to kind of figure out that balance. So they made the move to trade away Clint Capella to go incredibly small and allow to only have one non-spacer on the floor in Westbrook, and it helped not only the team out, but it helped Westbrook out a ton as well. So coming into this postseason, there were high hopes for what this Rockets team could potentially do, because they had some really good stretches in this super small ball experiment. Westbrook has had some injury issues, so maybe you could blame some of his poor performances on that, but specifically in this Lakers series, he is becoming an offensive liability for this team, because the way the Lakers are defending Houston is they're just saying, you know what, we're going to double team James Harden, and if these other four guys on the floor beat us, so be it. But we're not going to lose this series because James Harden is averaging 35, 40 points a game. They're refusing to let that happen. Every time down the floor, whether it's in man or they're double teaming and they're in zone and they're shading multiple guys over to James Harden, they're not allowing him to get up his regular volume of shots, and that's forcing the other guys on the Houston Rockets to make three-point shots. And for the most part, in game two, they did a really good job. They did a good enough job to win that game in terms of their shots off the ball. They made a ton of threes, and guys like PJ Tucker, Daniel House, Eric Gordon had a really good game. Those guys stepped up, and it was a huge issue for the Lakers because they just continued to do what they do, and they were hoping the Rockets were going to miss at one point. And yeah, they had some cold stretches, but they shot the ball well enough to win that game in game two, potentially go up 2-0 in the series. But the problem was when Russell Westbrook was on the floor, because not only was he having issues reading the defense, turning the ball over, not shooting the ball incredibly well, but it was almost impossible for the Rockets to have good offensive possessions when he was on the floor with James Harden, because all that would happen was they would double James Harden, they would kick it out to the guy that was open, which was almost always Russell Westbrook. He would either shoot a three and most of the time miss it, or even on the rare occasion that he did drive, the rotation would come, one of the guys that double James Harden would get out to the shooter, and nothing would happen. Whereas if they had four floor spacers on the floor and they chose to double team James Harden, that first guy that's wide open that's normally Russell Westbrook is Daniel House, Robert Covington, Eric Gordon, PJ Tucker. Guys that were knocking down shots all game long. And it was clear, it was so clear that they were a better team without Russell Westbrook on the floor in game two. And if Russell Westbrook had played 20 minutes in that game, I would imagine the Rockets would have ended up winning game two. I think it was that much of a contrast between him being on or off the floor. And I understand the value that he provides as a playmaker, as a guy that can get to the rim, as a guy that can rebound the ball extremely well, can be really good defensively when he wants to be, but he was dealing with foul trouble most of the game, so his effort defensively was almost non-existent. I understand the things that Russell Westbrook does well, but in this series specifically, the Houston Rockets have a Russell Westbrook problem. And I don't know that the coaching staff has the, I don't know how to phrase this other than like the guts to not play Russell Westbrook his normal minutes in this series, but I think that's what it's going to take for them to have the best chance to win, because when you're making as many threes as the Rockets did in Game 2 and you're still not winning, something wrong is happening. And there was an opportunity for them to make even more threes in that game with the way that the Lakers are defending James Harden. And if you go with these 4 floor spaces around James Harden, maybe you cause the Lakers to do something different defensively, and then you can bring Westbrook in the game to do your normal thing, and maybe they switch it back, and you just go back and forth with that chess match. But it's just, he's just not a good enough shooter. He's not a good enough player off the basketball right now to be on the floor a ton with James Harden. And even, when you're considering, okay, well, when Harden's off the floor, he should be on there too. Eric Gordon's been really good as a perimeter creator as well. And it's such a weird situation because you gave up these assets to get a guy that was supposed to help elevate your team, right? And then you gave up even more assets to get rid of Clint Capella to tailor what you do towards him, because you can't have 2 non-spacers on the floor at the same time. And there are times when it looks good, but specifically with how the Lakers are defending the Houston Rockets right now, it's a huge, huge issue. Now, to be fair, there certainly are some things that the Rockets can do with Westbrook on the floor to make things a little bit easier on him. They can make him not just stand on the perimeter. They can have him, kind of work the middle of the floor, be almost kind of like a release valve for James Harden and play 4-on-3 from there, but the 3 shooters on the perimeter and Westbrook closer to the rim, but you're relying on him to make the correct decision there as the guy in the middle of the floor, and judging by the turnovers and things like that, that's not always going to be the case. And honestly, right now, I think the Lakers are more than happy to let Russell Westbrook try and beat them. And I think that whenever, there was a weird situation at the end of Game 2 where they challenged a call on Rajon Rondo, ended up getting it reversed to a charging call on Russell Westbrook, which gave him 5 fouls. But in a weird way, that didn't work out for them, because you want Westbrook on the floor, because when he's off, they were getting killed. I don't know what Westbrook's plus minus is off the top of my head. I'm sure I'll show it on screen, but it was really, really bad just because of all the floor spacing issues that I continue to talk about with Westbrook. So I'm sure that there are coaches on the Lakers coaching staff right now that are thinking, man, I really hope they play Westbrook 40 minutes a game the rest of the way, because they're just such a better team than the Rockets when Westbrook is on the floor. And yeah, there are a lot of things the Lakers did well in Game 2 to kind of withstand all of the 3-point barrage the Rockets put on them in that game. They shot the ball well from 3 as well from a percentage standpoint, and of course they did a lot of good things at the rim. LeBron turned it on a little bit in the fourth quarter as well. But the advantage that the Rockets have in terms of that 3-point discrepancy is really their only opportunity to win a game against a team that just overall as a team is much better than them in the Lakers, and they're limiting that opportunity, they're limiting that advantage the more and more that Russell Westbrook is on the floor. So I'm not advocating for him to not be on the floor at all. He needs to be out there obviously to be a playmaker when Harden is either tired or just not on the floor. But the way that they're being defended right now, he's not helping them by just standing off the ball and shooting. And even on those drives and on those attacks, he's not making the correct decisions. And like I already talked about, the way the rotations work off the double team, it's just not very good offense right now. So 4 shooters in James Harden works really well. 4 shooters in Russell Westbrook works not as well, but still pretty good. Both of them on the floor right now at the same time is just not a great strategy, and it's a huge, huge problem, especially for a guy that they gave up the amount of assets they did in Russell Westbrook. And yeah, there you have it. That is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.